个观影的一个活动，就是
哦，OK，
电影，嗯，蛮
OK，
好的一部电影，嗯。
嗯
Okay, we're finished.
I wouldn't have
Chinese.
known. The subtitles were not working.
Yeah, no subtitle.
Yeah.
All right, so we're supposed to be addressing reincarnation, a very simple to teach, very straightforward idea. Wait, to see if I can hear it. Yeah, and one of the two things. One, I saw an article that Dot had shared that I think some of you had seen from Asia Torah, and I'm going to address some of the points of what he wrote about. And two, I got a request today to maybe explain, before going into more depth, how Jews deal with reincarnation as compared to the Buddhist idea of reincarnation. So it's funny that you should ask me that, because when I was in university back in 1873, my minor at the university was actually comparative religion. And so I was very involved in studying everything from the writings Buddha, Confucius, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, the Vedas, Shinto texts. So this really was a very strong background I had in many of these teachings and so on. So the good news is I remember about that much of anything I learned. So I had to go back and look it up again. But the interesting thing about the Buddhist idea is that again, just from sources that I know, the Buddhists don't really deal with the idea of soul of a person. It's more, I would call it in Hebrew, ruach, a spirit, or ruach, which also means a wind or a life force. And it streams like the way wind streams. So it's like a stream of consciousness. There was a great author of not many years ago named James Joyce, who was famous because the way that he wrote was called free-flowing consciousness. So the Buddhist idea of the spirit of the human is like a wind, and the wind never stops moving. So the wind, like a snail, picks up a shell and it lives in the shell, and then the shell goes away and the snail finds another shell, if you will. Another thing is that this is a very important idea in Buddhism. It's really a fundamental concept in Buddhist teachings. You know, when we see, for example, the Dalai Lama in Tibet, and there was a question of who became the reincarnation of the last leader, and they had to go around the world, and they finally found this little boy, and they attributed to him that he was the reincarnation. So this power of reincarnation is very central in Buddhist thinking. In Judaism, it's not only not central, but when you go to basic texts, it's almost impossible to find anything about it. Which is why, if I could jump for a minute to the article that you sent, I found it very interesting the way he wrote, because the question that was asked to the author was, what do Jews think about reincarnation? And instead of answering the question, which he only did towards the end of the article, he instead started talking about resurrection of the dead. Now, resurrection of the dead and reincarnation have overlap, but they are not the same thing. There is a lot of, like in geometry, if you have two circles, you have the intersection area. There is an intersection of commonality between reincarnation and resurrection, but they're really very different. That's why I kind of found it funny that he was asked about reincarnation and right away jumped to resurrection of the dead. Now, before we go back to reincarnation, resurrection of the dead, however, is very much a primary Jewish belief. In fact, the Rambam, Maimonides, when he codified the 13 basic pillars of Jewish faith, included belief in the resurrection of the dead. By the way, Jews we have a little joke on Shabbos. There's a food that we eat called, in one language, I think it comes from the French, it's called cholent. Others call it adafina, but it's usually kind of like a food that's very heavy, very thick. It's put on the fire from Friday, and it's not eaten until Saturday day. And everybody who eats this food, they fall asleep immediately. Shabbat afternoon is the quietest time if you ever want to have quiet in Jerusalem or Israel, because everybody's sleeping from having eaten this food. So there was one rabbi who, as a joke, said that if you ever want a proof of the resurrection of the dead, it's because everybody eats this food and then they come back to life. So that's like a proof that people will come back to life. However, on the subject of the resurrection of the dead, even in the Talmud, which also does talk about it, it scratches hard to find even hints in the Tanakh, in the Bible, the Torah stories at all. And it has to come to very subtle, very obscure references. For example, when the coming up in the Torah soon, we will be reading about the amazing story of the splitting of the Red Sea. Moses lifting up his arms and the sea splitting and the Jewish nation running to the other side, and then the water engulfing the Egyptians. And when the Jews were on the other side, they sang a song, which is part of the Bible. And it says, then, this is the problem with the English, but we'll work with it for a minute. Then Moses sang this song. Oz Yashir Moshe et Ashira Hazot. And Moshe sang the song. But when you read this in the Hebrew, it doesn't say that. Az Yashir means Moses will sing. And the Talmud says, what's that? What do you mean he will sing? He sang. What do you mean he will sing? So based on the fact that it says he will sing, it pulls as one of the references to the dead will be resurrected. And in the future, when the ocean of nature will be ripped apart, in the same way that the ocean of water was ripped apart on a minor scale, on the mega scale of the world's laws of nature. Imagine all of a sudden one day you're outside and you see like fingers appearing in the sky, and suddenly it rips open. There's a big peekaboo, right? So at that moment, when the dead will come back to life, they will sing. So even resurrection, which is called a fundamental belief, is very difficult to find, let alone reincarnation. Now, reincarnation depends upon, or is rather built upon, a supposition. Like when you build a theory, you have to have a postulate. So the postulate of reincarnation is that there's life after death. Because if there's no life after death, then there's no life to come back, because it's just off, right? When you turn off the light, it's off. I remember as a little kid, I always wondered, did the light go off in the refrigerator when you close the door? But there was no way to kind of close it and see at the same time. And I actually asked my mom if we could have a glass door so I could see in, you know, what happens when the door closes. So of course there was this professor from San Francisco who started with the whole theory. No, the light's still on, and the vegetables are dancing, and the cabbages are reading books. But when the door opens, whoop, they all go back to what they normally were. Okay, but that was just for kids. But anyhow, the idea is that if there's no life after death, then it's certainly no life coming back. So life after death, there are amazing stories, even in the written Torah, although they are more found in the books of the prophets, the Nevi'im, as we call them. For example, when Saul had been told by the prophet Samuel that he blew it with the war against Amalek. So he was told that he was no longer going to remain king. And as he was no longer going to remain king, he became very afraid. And he did something that as a Jewish person, we're really not supposed to do. And that is, sorry, just 1 second. And that is, Jews are not allowed to be involved with black magic or sorcery or witchcraft. Now, I'm just going to take a little side here. As long as we happen to be here, you know something about Torah, it's hyper, it's not linear. So we got to make sure you hold on to the main thread, which I will, I promise. But as long as we're just here, I want to step over into this little store for 1 minute about black magic, sorcery, and all these things. This is the cool thing, is that it's for real. There really is black magic and sorcery, and all this is really real. It's not just make-believe, because God would not prohibit the make-believe. There's an amazing story from the Gaon of Vilna in the 1700s in Europe, where they caught a warlock, a Jewish warlock, because a non-Jewish warlock, they're allowed to do that, but not a Jew. And they brought this warlock to the court of the Vilna Gaon. They wanted to see if he was for real. So the Vilna Gaon asked him, "What was I doing last night?" And he said, "You were learning Torah." And everybody started to laugh, because what else does the Vilna Gaon do but learn Torah? Well, he wasn't playing mahjong, right? So what was he doing? So then he said, "Okay, what was I learning?" And the man said, "Kabbalah." And everybody laughed again, because everybody knows that's all the Vilna Gaon learned at night was Kabbalah. So he said, "And who was I learning with?" And the man said he named 3 rabbis that had died 800 years before the Vilna Gaon. And the Vilna Gaon said, "Okay, he's for real, get rid of him." So there are, this power of black magic is really real. That's why God says, for us, don't touch it. Have faith in God. Just only work with God and ignore all that. Nonetheless, we are human beings and we have moments of weakness. And King Saul had a moment of weakness, and he went to a witch. And he asked her to bring back the soul of Samuel. And the Torah, it's right there, black and white. You don't even have to go on to the oral tradition. The Torah says that Samuel came back from the dead, accompanied by Moses. They were there together. Now, I don't remember if it's actually in the Tanakh or in the Talmud, but it says that they came upside down. They came feet first. This is because since the world after this world is completely the opposite of this world, so what appears to us as upside down is over there, right side up, and vice versa. But what you see from this story is a clear written example of life after death. Now, there are many stories in the Talmud of life after death. And then, of course, if you move into the Zohar, it's not just life after death, it's what life is like after death. I mean, in depth. And of course, it then leads to the world of reincarnation, which is highlighted mostly by the writings of Reb Chaim Vital, the student of the Arizal in Tzfat, in a book called Sefer Gilgulim. Now, Gilgul is the Hebrew word ascribed, and I'm using the word ascribed, you'll see why, to reincarnation. I say ascribed because the actual translation of Gilgul does not mean reincarnation. Rather, it means to roll. For example, in Hebrew, modern Hebrew, gal is a wave. So a wheel is a galgal. It's something which galgalim, it rolls. So Gilgul are things which roll. So there is this idea of the souls are rolling over in this idea of being reincarnated. Now, before we get back to that word, and through that word, we will learn a lot of the Jewish understanding of reincarnation. I got to do a timeout. I did this when I gave this class with the Dutch as well. I want to go back to square one because I think it's such an important point. And the point is, like, who cares? I mean, who cares about reincarnation? I mean, think about it for a minute. First of all, with all of these people who say, yes, for only $1,000, I will be happy to tell you who your earlier incarnation was, and they take out all of these different cards and they burn incense and they do all these, and they look at the lines in your hands and and then they tell you who you are. Well, who are you when you hear about these people? Oh, you were the queen of Persia in the year 365. You were the king of Norway during the time of the Vikings. Right? Well, what happened to the garbage man? He never comes back, right? Oh, you were the guy who like cleaned the out of the stables. What? Those people don't come back? Only the kings and the queens and the high priest, only those people come back, right? It's kind of funny. I mean, I guess you wouldn't pay $1,000 to have somebody say, yeah, you were a truck driver in Berlin in 1920. I mean, oh, I want my money back. I don't want to be that. Why? Tell me something. So it's really kind of funny that none of like the just normal Joe, those guys don't come back as reincarnations, but whatever. I mean, there's a kind of a fantasy that people ascribe to reincarnation that now, where right now I feel like I'm just a schmo. I'm not really important. I'm not of any, but now that I've been told for $1,000 that I was the king of Norway in the time of the Vikings, haha, see, I am a something. Well, that's nonsense. You don't have to be the reincarnation of the king of Norway to be a something. You are a something. You're created in the image of God. What could you add to that? What could be more amazing to that? I mean, and not only that, every person is holy and sacred. It's not like God is up in heaven and he's in the human factory machine. All right, let's start over there with the Africans, drop another, let's see, another 1.5 million Africans down into the little, okay, now we need to fill up some more Brazilians. Oh my gosh, what happened in China? I turn off the machine, look, there's so many, oh, India, oh, all right, let's forget about that part of the world. Let's go back now over what's happening in Mexico. It's not like that. God's not like just dropping down millions of people. Every single person, when there's still this little soul, is kissed on the forehead by God. And God says to you, you know what? Forget the United States Marine Corps or the Green Berets. Unfortunately, I don't know the special military units of the Chinese, but I'm sure you have them also. Forget the Mossad. Forget those guys are nothing. You're going on the most dangerous trip your soul will ever experience. You are going to go past the world of angels into the lowest place in creation, lower than hell. Remember, in Judaism, hell is above earth. Christianity, there's heaven and hell under it, and they're fighting for earth. That's not at all Jewish. In Jewish, it's heaven and then hell and then earth. Why? Because in hell, there's consciousness, there's awareness of God. Might not be too comfortable, but it's honest and it's real. Whereas earth is total darkness. It's amnesia. It's what am I doing here? And you pick up these little things of what you think life is all about, and you could wind up wasting and losing your whole life. And that beautiful soul can become so blemished that it can't get back. Let's use an analogy. In the world of space technology, if your rocket does not have enough firepower, it will not be able to get out of the radiation belt that encircles the Earth. We call it the Van Allen belt. You can't get out. If it's strong enough, it'll break beyond. And once it's beyond, it's free from the Earth's gravitational pull. But if it's not, it goes back down. That's what reincarnation is. Reincarnation, which is probably why it's not such an honored element of Jewish thought is an unfortunate experience of a soul that failed and has to now try again. Give an example. Imagine you put a dirty shirt in the washing machine and the bell goes off and you go over and you open up the washing machine door and you look in and you see the shirt's still dirty. So you say, okay, I'm going to run another cycle. Well, imagine if the shirt went, no, just take me out of here, please. You go, what, are you crazy? You're still dirty. So that's what reincarnation is. Reincarnation is the soul comes up and doesn't manage, it didn't learn the lessons here. We're going to get into what the lessons are, but it didn't learn them. And now it just has to come back down and try it again. In fact, there was a very intense rabbi of 200, 300 years ago known as the Kutzker Rebbe. He was very facetious. And he said, let me tell you something. After 120 years, when you go upstairs to heaven, they're not going to offer you heaven. Forget about that. No way you're going to heaven. They're only going to give you two choices, to go to hell or to be reincarnated. He said, pray for hell. Just pray for it. It's hard, it's painful, it's difficult, but then you're done. Reincarnation, whoop, you come back, it could be even worse than the last time if the person doesn't learn the lesson. In fact, the Arizal says that there are very few new souls that are in this world. Most of us are here up to 5 times. Now the question is, how do you come back 5 times and who are you anyhow, right? You could go like, this could be like 30 years in a psychiatrist's office trying to figure out who you are. And not only that, if the psychiatrists have to deal with all your incarnations, you'll be there for 100 years. But the real question is, who are you if you're reincarnated? I'll tell you a story. In yeshiva, during the holiday of Purim, we have a tradition where we make plays. And I used to write the plays a lot for when I was in yeshiva. And I did a play about resurrection of the dead, but it's the same idea as you'll see in a minute. And on the stage, it was dark, so you couldn't tell that there were 4 people lying on the ground with their feet like this towards you. And all you saw on the side, because of a spotlight, was like the front of a house. And now a second spotlight actually comes on one of the 4 people who's just starting to sit up and is getting up and and brushing off dirt as if he's just come out of the grave and back to life again. And he looks and he sees the house. He says, wow, I'm home. And he's so happy. And while he's there, the third spotlight, the next guy's starting to get up. Now, this guy who got up is dressed kind of like you and me. But the next guy getting up is wearing like clothes from the 1700s. And he suddenly gets up and he sees the house. And he says, wow. And before those 2 guys can talk, the third guy who's dressed like from the year, 800, and the 4th guy who's dressed from like 2,000 years ago, they get up. And they all come over to the same house and they're all going, home, home. And of course, they start to fight over, wait, this is my home. This is my home. Meaning, of course, each one lived in that home, but in a period of hundreds of years ago. So what happens when you are reincarnated? Which one of your, when you are resurrected, which one of your reincarnations is resurrected? So to understand this, we have to go into a very deep idea to understand what we are at all. And then the idea of reincarnation and resurrection will make as much sense as mud. But at least that's something. So we'll start there. The body is the physical part of a person. The soul, which we're going to break down, has 5 parts. 2 of them are completely beyond reach of human beings. But they are the highest, which is attached to the throne of God, and it funnels life to the next level, which is also beyond our scope. And then it gets to the 3rd level, which is called the neshama, which is often translated as soul. Then it gets to the 4th level, which is inside of our body, called ruach, which is the spirit. And that is to the lowest level, which even animals have, which is called nephesh. These are the 5 parts of the soul and the body. How do the body and the soul work together? On one hand, if you have a balloon and you puncture a hole in it, all the air comes out. So how does your body that has holes, how does it keep the soul from not floating out? Second of all, even if the soul is able to stay, and it does, thank God, in our body, how is their responsibility? In other words, there's a Talmud says a very beautiful story. It says the following story. There was a blind man and there was a cripple who couldn't walk. And the cripple comes over to the blind man. He says, listen, right in front of you is this beautiful pardes, orchard of wonderful fruit. Let's go eat it. And the blind man says, I can't see. And the crippled man says, I know, and I can't walk. So I'm going to get on your shoulders and I will guide you. And you'll walk for us and I will watch for us and we'll go get the food. So they go over and they're eating until the owner comes along and he starts yelling with a stick. He says, thieves, thieves. And he starts to hit them. And the crippled man says, why are you hitting me? I could never get here without this guy. And the blind man says, well, why are you hitting me? I wouldn't even know they were here if not for that guy. So what does the owner do? He takes the crippled guy, he puts him back up on the shoulders of the blind guy, and he hits them both at the same time. Meaning that after 120 years, the body is going to say, don't blame me for anything I did wrong. I'm just dirt. If I didn't have a soul inside of me, I couldn't even move. And the soul is going to say, don't blame me. I'm just like a ghost. I can't even touch something. It's only the body that was able to touch things in an improper way. So what does God do in the resurrection of the dead? He brings back the body and puts the soul back in and judges as one. But now the question is, let's go deeper. Who are we in all of these things? Like we do know on a very simple biological level that we carry a lot of baggage before we get to reincarnation just from our parents in our DNA. There's a lot that's there. There's the DNA, which has many, many levels of impact in our nature of our being. But there's even more, let's call it emotional DNA. There's the kind of emotional chemistry that's made up. That's why we know that many things that impact the mental well-being of a person actually occurs while they are still inside their mother's stomach, because the vibrations of what the mother is experiencing while she is pregnant, these vibrations are going into the most primordial, basic level of the creation of the child. So if a mother is very worried and always afraid when she's pregnant, that child is probably going to have a personality that will reflect it. And even, of course, before the pregnancy, there are many, many, many levels of the family lineage that goes into impacting the child, as does this person's incarnations. So where incarnation does become important is not about what we were, but more about who we are. In other words, unlike the Buddhist idea of simply a spirit which is moving, the concept of a soul is a personality. And that personality on certain levels is more distinct than on the higher subtle levels. So on the lower levels of the soul in the body, the ruach, which is one step above the animal, which is my Gedalia personality, as opposed to dot personality, that ruach is unique to this incarnation. But when you go above the ruach to the level of the neshama, that higher being of your more pure essence is always the same. But it becomes manifest in a different way. I'll give you a visual analogy to help you understand this. We mentioned before that the Arizal says that souls are reincarnated 5 times. this is related to the idea of 5 fingers on your hand. They all stem from the same hand. So now imagine, like, if you just had one finger, or maybe like little finger puppets. If you have one finger that dips down into the body, so that finger right now is you, and here's the body, and here's you in it. But it's going to be very different than when this finger comes down into the world, because each one of those fingers coming down have a different ruach, even though they all stem from the same neshama, from the same soul. So therefore, at the level of resurrection of the dead, that will be the composite of all 5 of you as one. And it's hard to kind of imagine, because of course we only think of ourselves in terms of the way that we recognize each other as our personalities. But the reality of what we think of as our personalities is really just a question of how we are manifesting our ruach, but the level of soul is much higher. Now, it goes the other way as well. This aspect of you in this incarnation, in this body, what you do down here, when you come out, it now goes in here. These things feed into this. So this, which is why, by the way, you have all of your lifeline and all your history, it's all here, it's all written right here, because it's recorded all that history of what is and what's supposed to be now, and even what will be. But what same idea on a spiritual level, all of these things, as they're done, they come back and they create. It's kind of like, if you want to use an analogy of maybe in your university. So you have one exam, you have another exam, you have another exam, but then you have your final grade. So that final grade is the resurrection of the dead, where the sum total of those 5 incarnations now are whatever you made them to be. That's the incredible danger of free will, the incredible danger of coming down into this dark world of not necessarily even knowing why we're here. You know, it's interesting. I'll just say this. I was sharing this a little bit with the Africans today. I said, the problem with the Western world, and please forgive me, because I don't mean this in any way to be insulting, but unfortunately, in my opinion, China has also become part of the Western world, which in many ways is very sad, because I would kind of hope that you have such an incredible history of wisdom that you would be smarter than that. However, let me explain to you, having grown up in Midtown Manhattan, in the middle of America, the heart of all Western world, from Madison Avenue advertising agencies to having also with David Sachs worked in Hollywood. Let me tell you, when I used to work in Hollywood, you go to the lots, they have these big buildings. They look like factories with all these pipes coming in, woo, woo, red light saying don't open the door. And inside there, they're shooting the TV show, and sometimes you have live people there, and there's a guy and he holds up, says, laugh now, and everyone laughs, even though it wasn't funny. And they produce these TV shows, and you watch them in China, and you watch them in South Africa, and the whole world watches them. And I used to look at these, I think, wow, these are like mind factories. Instead of producing shoes or skateboards, they're producing programs for the human brain. Okay, everybody around the world, you better wear this Jordache, or you better wear this brand label, or you better have Gucci, or you better have this, or you'll be a loser, or if you don't smoke cigarettes, you're not a cowboy, or if you don't drive this car, you're not gonna get that beautiful woman. All this lies to steal your life from you, to make you work day and night like a dog, so that you have money to keep buying things. And no matter how much you buy, it's never enough. That's the name of the disease. The disease is called, it's never enough. The Talmud says, if you have, well, zuz was one of the words for coins in those days. If you have 200 zuz, you already want 400 zuz. There's no end. In fact, this was what happened when Esav met Yaakov. Esav said, Yeshli Rav. It doesn't mean he had a rabbi. It means he had a lot. Rav means a lot. What does it mean I have a lot? It means I have a lot, but I need to have a lot more. One of my best friends was supposed to move to Israel from New York when I came. And he says to me, you go ahead, Gedalia. This is like back in 1980 something. You go ahead. I work on Wall Street. I'm going to put aside $5 million, which was a lot of money in 1983. And I'll come when I hit $5 million. Okay. This gentleman, who I'm still very, very close with, has made a lot more than $5 million. And I say to him, hey, don't you remember you were going to come to Israel? You made $5 million. He said, yeah, but you know, I didn't realize how little $20 million is. I'm a nothing. I'm a nothing. You know, I work with guys who are a little something because they have 100 million. And I work with some other guys who are billionaires. And that's not even as much as it used to be. I don't know if you ever saw the Austin Power movies, Mike Myers. But if you remember when his dad was brought back from the crisis, I want $1 million. And they all laughed at him because that, whoa, what, $1 million, right? So that's the problem. You can never be satisfied. You always want more. There's always the new thing. In fact, I'm going to tell you just as a tangent, but it's so important, a very deep teaching from the Talmud. In the Talmud, there are certain formats, or yeah, formats is a good word, to help you understand what's actually happening. And one of those formats, if you have two particular rabbis, if they use the language of, by the second rabbi, said rabbi, or rabbi said, in other words, which order? Is it say the word said and then his name, or his name and then said? That indicates to you if the second opinion is arguing on the first opinion or bringing a separate opinion, not as an argument, but say a different reflection on the same subject. Okay, hold that idea. In the Gemara, it says as follows. It says that the nature of a person's evil inclination renews itself against you every day. And then the next rabbi comes along and says, the nature of the evil inclination strengthens itself against you every day. And one of the commentators points out, according to our formula, the second rabbi is not using the language of arguing. In other words, on a superficial reading of the Talmud, it would seem these are two rabbis arguing as to the nature of the evil inclination. One says it renews itself, and the other one says it strengthens itself. But this rabbi comes along and says, no, they're not arguing. Look at the language. It's using the wrong language for argument. Rather, they're talking about two separate types of people. One is a person with wisdom, and one is a person who's alive but basically brain dead. The brain dead person, for the evil inclination to defeat this person's purpose in this world and thus come back as a reincarnation again, all it needs to do is come up with the iPhone 20. And then when that becomes old, it'll just come up with the iPhone 30. And then that until it's the iPhone 3000. And then you're dead. That's all it needs to do. There was a cartoon many years ago when smartphones, as you know, that was my background. When smartphones were first coming around, there was a cartoon called Dagwood. And he's like a dad, and he goes into a store to buy his first smartphone. And he says to the owner, my son said I have to buy a cool phone. So the guy shows him a phone. So Dagwood says, is this cool? And the guy says, yeah, this week. So it's just a question of how the new becomes old. You know, I just remember a true story. I won't mention any names, not that you would necessarily know this person, but my first trip to China, you know, I'm a hippie, or I was a hippie. I don't really care about fashions. I don't care about what's cool. It just so doesn't interest me. I only care about is the person I'm talking to alive and real, then I'm very, very happy. But if you have Gucci or you have Moochie or Poochie. It doesn't mean anything to me. So, you know, wow, I'm going to China. I can't believe this. My whole life, I've always heard about China. This is like so exciting. And I'm like, wow, I can't wait to get there. And I get there and I'm with people because through my business, I was working that time with a company of Dun& Bradstreet. So I was with some of the people of Dun & Bradstreet in Shanghai offices, and they decided they're going to take me all around. I can't remember. We went to it was Beijing. We went to the Forbidden City. I was like, whoa, this is so cool. And I whip out my camera and I'm taking pictures and I'm going over to everybody. Oh, our son, right? And bing, bing, bing. And I look and my friends are horrified. I think, oh my gosh, maybe you're not allowed to take pictures, but they can't be. Everybody's taking pictures. Chinese people are coming over to me like I'm Waldo. Can I stand next to you and take a picture with you? You know, so I was like, for sure, you know, for free. Okay, can I take two? So anyhow, so like I'm like there, and I thought, what's wrong? Why this? And they said, where did you get that camera? I don't know. It's my camera. It just takes pictures. Isn't that what a camera's supposed to do? Oh, it's so old. I said, I have no idea how old it is. We have a rule. If it's not broken, you don't fix it. It's not broken. What's wrong with it? It takes pictures. Oh, no, listen. We're going to have to tell everybody you borrowed your mother's camera. This is a true story. Because they were so embarrassed that their American friend who is Israeli from high-tech world is there, and I don't have the most amazing camera in my telephone. I actually had an a camera, you know, it was mind-boggling to me. And of course, you know, what can I do? But that's what I did. So if you get into life is outside of your body, and happiness is buy and buy and buy, shop until you drop, then there's no life. All the evil inclination needs to do is come up with a new thing, and you'll say, wow, this is really cool. I gotta have it. Oh, no, now I gotta have this, gotta have that, until you're dead. You never grew. But if you realize it's all inside of you, that power of acquisition, if you used it instead of, hey, it's important to have a bank account. You can do wonderful things with money in the world. Absolutely true. There are many poor people you can help. You can feed the starving. There's wonderful things you can do. It's okay. But there's something greater. If you could use acquisition and go inside yourself, like little internal barbells, I'm getting bigger muscles, stronger. I'm wiser. The growth is not algebraic. It's geometric. It's not 1 + 1 + 1 + 1. It's 1 + 3 + 5 + 9 + 50. Who you can become in a short period of time by going in, taking hold of your soul and going on that inward voyage to see what you have inside of yourself. For example, do you know how little of your brain you use? Just open up a science book. Just look at how small a percentage of our brains we use. It's mind-boggling. If you want to see a really cool movie that came out, I think 2 years ago, check out the movie Lucy. Can't remember her name, the famous blonde actress. But it's a great movie. It's all about this woman who suddenly can use 100% of her brain. It's a brilliant movie. And since you are all young puppies, I will tell you that the reason it's called Lucy is because this came from a famous Beatles song called Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Lucy, L in the sky, S with diamonds, D, LSD. Ah, that's right. That's right. Thank you. Scarly, right. Got her lesson. Yes, that's it. So anyhow, oh, you saw the film. Okay. So you saw the film. You totally know what I'm talking about. So that's the point of the film, is that it's just a small part of our brain we use. So how about going there? How about going there instead of another shoe store? Go into this store. Try to open up another little piece, another little piece. It's there. It's there. When you get a brilliant idea, it's not that the brilliant idea existed. It means that you finally discovered it. It was always there. The wisdom is there. It's just a question of you opening it. Now, what if you open at the same time your heart? What if you feel every minute? What if you hear every bird? What if you know the names of the different kinds of birds and the sounds they make? What if you understand everything about the animal world? What if you understand about the angel world? What if you understand because you feel everything? And then what happens if you open your soul? Wow. You open your soul, you open your heart, you open your mind, you go inside and you find that. Here's why people will hate you, because you will no longer be buying everything. You will no longer be talking about the stupidities of the newest this or the latest that. Okay, maybe they have some importance on some level, but you can't deal with it anymore. It becomes nonsense to you. Oh, for that person, how does the evil inclination challenge that person? By becoming stronger. Because just to simply come up with an iPhone 20, you've seen through that. You don't care anymore. But when you go deeper in yourself, now it has to resist. So let me tell you a little bit about your evil inclination. Here's the news. It's not evil at all. Your evil inclination is your best friend. The Zohar says that after a person dies and they come upstairs, they get a printout of all the good things they did in their life. And that's your ticket to heaven. But you can't go straight to heaven. You got to go to the devil. And the devil's going to look up your number, and he's going to write a number next to every good deed you did. And that number that he writes will reflect how much effort he made to stop you from doing that good deed. And according to how much he stopped you, that's going to be the value of your good deed. For example, two people. One person is really a miser. They really cannot give money out of their pocket to charity. It drives them out of their mind. The person next to him or her has a big, generous personality. He'll give money or she'll give money to anybody who needs money, like water. They're walking down the street. They see a very poor person. Both of them reach in their pocket and both of them give some money to the poor person. Well, for the person who's naturally generous, this was not very difficult. But for the person who hates to give money, who overcame that negative aspect of themselves and still gave the money, that's huge. So it's not the action per se, it's the challenge. For example, if you go into a gymnasium, or into a gym rather, and there are weights. When you lift weights, what's happening? It's the very weight of the weight that makes your muscles stronger. Imagine you walk in there and everybody's in one corner and there's one guy there, big muscle guy, and he's got like tattoos, and his tattoos have tattoos. And this person is like, everyone's, oh, can I autograph your tattoo? Right? They're all like into this guy. He's like, right? And what does he do? He has a barbell made out of, it says 500 kilo. And with his pinky, he's going like this, and everyone's going, wow, look at this guy, Samson, Hercules, with his pinky lifting it up. He puts it down, and everybody leaves. And you go over, I'm just a little Woody Allen, but I'm going to try anyhow. And I take with two hands, and not one to paint, two hands, and I'm waiting to immediately have a hernia and go rush to the hospital, but I'm going to try it. And all my might, and woo, it pops up like nothing. And I look, and I see it's made out of styrofoam. It's not real. It's just painted to look like a 500-pound barbell, but it's not real. He was fooling everybody. But he was the big fool, because it's the very weight of the barbell that makes your muscles bigger. It's the same thing with your soul. The things that are hard for you to do, these are the things your soul needs to work on. The Baal Shem Tov uses it as an analogy as follows. He says, when you fight a war and you come into the enemy city, wherever you have the greatest resistance, there is where you know is the most important spot to hit. If you're defending a city, you're not going to put your best soldiers to defend the public park. You're going to put them to defend the telecommunications center or the ammunition depot, because the most important is where you're going to put your strongest soldiers. So when you go to battle in your soul, what you find is the hardest, that's your greatest reward. That's the heaviest weight of the barbells of your soul. And if you could go in and fight and win, those will be the places that you will grow. And the Baal Shem says that this is how you know what your reincarnation work is. Because the things that for you, which might not be for anybody else, but for you are difficult, those are the things you still have not fixed from the earlier incarnations. That's the way you become aware of them, is by being honest with your soul and your personality and realize, wow, why is it so hard for me not to speak bad about other people when I'm with my friends? Why, when we all get together in a bar and somebody laughs at somebody because they have too much weight on their body, why is that funny? How's that funny? How's it funny to make fun of somebody because they have black skin? I miss the humor. Where's the humor in that? That's funny. Somebody's handicapped? That's funny. Somebody falls, people laugh? That's funny? Really? I don't think so. You probably also don't think so. But we get sucked into the crowd. We don't want to be different. We don't want to stand out. We want to make sure we got Gucci like everybody else has Gucci, thinking that we're free and so independent when we're slaves to be like just everybody else. And what a waste of a life, because you're not like everybody else. You're unique. You're loved by God. You're unique. You have the image of God in you. Imagine you could touch that power, and you can. And that's the gift you have. But the clock ticks, and it doesn't tick forever. So, you know, at that moment, in fact, it just reminded me now of a very powerful medrash. It talks about 3 forms of passion. It says the weakest of the 3, which, you know, as a red-blooded man, I could tell you it's quite powerful, but it's called the weakest, is the sexual drive, the desire for a man and a woman to be sexually together. It's a very powerful passion, but it's the weakest of 3 passions. More powerful than that desire is the desire of the rain to come down and impregnate the earth and give birth to food on the planet. That drive is even more powerful. And even that is secondary. It's not the number 1. What is the most powerful force of these passions, says the Medrash? It says the minute a person dies, what happens? At that moment, our eyesight is no longer limited to our eyeballs. We can see without our eyes. We see everything. We know everything. And what happens at that moment, we understand what the opportunity of life was given to us. And we try and would do anything to be able to just go back in the body and move it and do one mitzvah, to do one will of God in the world. But we can't. It's game over. And that desire to try to go back when the game is over is overwhelming. That's one of the Jewish definitions of hell, is that awareness that suddenly comes because there's no more purpose in hiding that awareness from you, because you're no longer on the basketball court. The buzzer went off. The game is over. I remember when, I'm sure you had this as well in China, but when I was a kid in young school, we would have tests. I guess your children won't even have an idea what I'm talking about, because we used to use paper and pen for our tests. And so everyone would get the test. We'd all be sitting in our desks. And when you were done, you had to take the paper up to the teacher's table. Now, the rule was you had to put it on her table. The minute you let go, you cannot take that paper back. If before you let go, you suddenly had an idea, you can go back to your chair with a paper, change the answer. But the minute you let go, that's it. So you come up to the teacher's table and you see on her table are all the answers. And you say, whoa, can I see that? And she says, of course you can, of course. Just let go of the paper you're holding and I'll give you all the answers. So you let go and you get the answer. You, because now you realize you wrote the wrong answer on the third question. The answer was 12 instead of 14, but you can't do anything about it anymore. It's over. So that's what life is. It's just a limited amount of time, which makes it sacred. Because before you would throw, I hope, $1,000 out the window, don't throw an hour of your life out the window. You know, in America, I hope they don't do this in China, they use a stupid expression, I'm killing time. Are you out of your mind? Killing time? Killing time? Are you going to get it back? Do you get reimbursed? Can you like change in the last hour for another 2 hours? There's nothing more sacred than your time. Time, you know, money comes and goes, but time only goes. It's sacred. And the more that you realize how sacred it is, that every moment of your life, you invest your hours, even more than you would invest your money. And you're investing it. And if you invest it in a way where you really open your mind and your heart and your soul, there'll be no need to come back as the reincarnation. Because the reincarnation is the result of a failure. There's no need for that because you got the class, you got it right. You know, even in America, if you fail a course, you go to summer school, you have to do it again. That's reincarnation. So that's probably why it's not so looked up to in the Jewish realm. A, because it really doesn't matter who you were. B, anything that mattered from who you were, you can know now without needing to know what the reincarnation was, because just look at your difficulties. Those difficulties will tell you what you didn't do in the last world or life. And the things which come to you easy, oh, you're naturally a good person. That's because you already did the heavy lifting in the earlier incarnation. But if we're here because there's still more work to be done. So that could be class 1. We'll go way deeper on the next class into more of how it actually operates and all of its logistics. But I thank you all always. It's such a wonderful treat. And I guess this is the closest I can come to getting back to China these days. So anyhow, it's really nice. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Wonderful. Thank you. So
Thank
happy
you.
to see.
All right. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye,
For now.
Shalom.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Shalom. Bye. Toda.
Bye.